So, let me guess why you clicked on this video. You are a young car enthusiast who is just starting their career and you've actually came across a good bit of money. You enjoy driving your daily driver, but you want something a little bit more fun and something that'll get a little bit more attention from people than your basic Honda Civic. Well, let me show you this car. The Mazda MX-5 Miata. Today, I am going to tell you why the NA Miata is the perfect first classic car. Let's get into it. Now, while I love my SI to death, that thing just does not have the character that this bright silver Miata does. This car gets a lot of attention whenever I'm just driving it around. From old people to younger car enthusiasts, people just seem to be very interested in this car. And it's really humbling, to be honest with you. It's actually kind of hard to find these in really good condition, especially like this, that's tastefully modified and all that. And these things are actually really nice looking if you actually do it correctly, especially with its signature pretty much characteristic, the pop-up headlights. Now, if you do get a Miata, I do recommend getting like a bright color. Now, this is like preference, but I have to say the silver is probably my favorite part of this car. It really makes it seem like a pretty distinguished sports car compared to like some cheap thing. Like, these things really are very pretty cars, and it will give you a lot of attention whenever you're on the road. Now, I don't know how long this is actually going to last, or how good this statement is actually going to hold up, but these things are still pretty affordable right now. Now, the best ones that you see on Bring a Trailer with like 10,000, 15,000 miles are going for like $20,000 and above now. But you still are able to get these things at a pretty decent price. Now, I bought this before the big pandemic boom in 2020, like February, the beginning of February 2020. Now, I actually bought this thing for $1,500, which I will say was still pretty cheap compared to, was still pretty cheap back then. But now, these things have appreciated a lot now. But you can still find pretty decent quality ones for around $5,000. Now, this thing does have a little bit of body work that I do need to do to it, which is pretty much like the best ones to find, the ones that really need work, because those are pretty much going to be the best bang for your buck. And these things are pretty indestructible. Actually, thinking about that, you know, in my honest opinion, I have to say the Mazda MX-5 Miata has probably got to be one of the most reliable sports cars you can ever get. You don't really hear many transmission problems. You may have to replace the clutch after 200,000 miles, which these things often go to. But these engines are really stout. They might not be very powerful, but they're really low stress. It's pretty much like an economy car engine. This one's the 1.6 liter dual overhead cam inline 4, making around 116 horsepower and 100 foot-pounds of torque. But this engine's like, it asks for a beating. It revs all the way up to 6,500 RPM. The 1.8s are pretty good too. Those rev up to 7,000 RPM. But these things are not uncommon to actually get up to 200,000 or even 300,000 miles and still run like they're brand new. One of my favorite things about these engines is that they actually don't leak that much, to be honest with you. I hadn't really had to replace anything in this engine bay since I got it. One thing you will have to worry about, though, with getting a car this old, is you're going to have to replace the radiator, which I did back in 2020 when about 5 months after I got it, it started to spring a leak. But other than that, these things are pretty good when it comes to reliability. Just replace all the stuff that wears out or degrades, like the rubbers and the air filters. Pretty much there's only been a few things I've had to replace on this thing since I got it. The first thing I replaced about a week after I got it were the front wheel bearings, and those are really easy to replace. And I also had to replace this master cylinder and the slave cylinder, and those were pretty cheap. Those were about 40 bucks. The bearings were about 80. And the third thing was the only major, well, kind of major thing that I had to replace. And it was the starter, which is way down there. That's kind of a pain in the butt, but it is doable if you're actually pretty good with tools and you have access to a shop. It really makes it a lot easier. And that starter was only like 88 bucks. So I really haven't spent much money on this car. Now, there is one thing you do have to worry about on these things, and that pretty much goes with every convertible from the 90s or 80s. It's the tops. You do have to replace these tops, and they do get very bad. Now, I had this top replaced in December, and we have a local guy who works on Miata. It's called the Miata Fix. If you're an Alabama local, I'm probably going to put a link to his website in the description so you guys can actually get some help. He's actually a really good guy. Charged me $450 to put the top on, and I think I paid like $300 for the top on eBay. But these tops do come in different prices and different colors. Like, I kind of want a burgundy one, but my budget wouldn't allow it. But this top is actually done pretty good. And of course, there's the hard tops, and those things are like, I just saw one yesterday for 2,400 bucks. So those things can get very, very expensive. But other than that, these things are actually pretty reliable. This has been the most reliable car I've ever had. Other than that Civic, the Civic's like the second car that I've actually been able to get into and not worry about, and it starts every time. These things are actually pretty good. Now, I'm gonna open up the hood again. There's one thing I did kind of forgot to mention. It's for these earlier NAs, the 90s, and I think the midpoint of 21s, meaning 91s. These things have something called a short nose crank. Short nose crankshaft. You can tell if it has 4 holes instead of 8. And those things have a tendency to fail. There's like a key that locks in the crankshaft pulley, I think that's what it is. And if you're doing like a a timing belt replacement, those could get broken and it'll cause crank wobble. And if you have crank wobble, you'll have to replace the whole engine. So a lot of these 91s end up getting replaced by 1.8s for pretty cheap, and that's just one thing you do have to worry about. Luckily, my engine's pretty good. This car has almost 169,000 miles, and it's not giving me any trouble at all. Now, not only is this car cheap to own and cheap to maintain, it's also cheap to run. This car takes 87 octane, unlike that Civic out there, which takes 91 or 93, depending on where you are. And as you guys know, the gas prices are up there right now. Gas prices, last time I got gas was $4.15. Well, not last time. Last time I saw gas prices was $4.15. And that's just for regular. That's very expensive. But $20 in this thing still fills it up like about 60%. So that's pretty good. Gas mileage was around 25 on the highway, which isn't extremely good, but I'll be honest with you, I think these things actually get better because I don't see the gas needle actually dropping that quickly in this thing. Actually, I think this thing gets better gas mileage than the SI, and I spent $50 on that thing 3 weeks ago. So just for this thing to actually get some good gas mileage like that in a sports car, it really shows a testament to how good these things are. And really, to have that much fun on the road for so little is actually really nice, especially in today's climate. Now, one thing that's really great about this car is really how cheap it is. I know I've been saying it a lot, but it is really, really inexpensive to actually keep, maintain, and run. But I'll add another line to that. This thing is also really cheap to insure. Now, when I first got this car 2 years ago, this was pretty much my only car. This is my daily driver, which these things are actually absolutely great at doing with how reliable they are. They actually soak up highway miles pretty well. But when I first got this car in 2020, it was really, really inexpensive to insure compared to my 91 Accord or my 98 Integra that I had last. And this was great because at the time I was not very, very flush with cash, to be honest with you. I was just beginning my career, and I've managed to actually just get my dream car. And it turns out insurance costed a lot less than those Hondas did. In fact, the insurance was so cheap, this was with Geico at the time, that I was actually able to afford full coverage insurance for the first time ever. I couldn't believe it. Now, insurance for this car with liability at Geico was around $90. And full coverage insurance with Geico for this thing was $130, which was a really big deal because that's actually less than what I was paying for liability for the Integra. I think that was like $150 a month for liability at the time. And I was around 22, 21 at the time. So that was a really, really big deal. Now, I actually insure this car with Haggerty Classic Car Insurance, and they've really been good. If you get to an accident, these people will actually get taken care of and handled pretty quickly. I got into an accident in my 98 Ford Mustang GT, which I had covered, and having both of those cars covered under Haggerty costed less than having it covered by this car alone by Geico full coverage. So that was really good. And about a month later, I got a check for the damages. So they took care of this really well. So I really have the best regards for Haggerty. For how much it costs with Haggerty with this car is $67 a month. Like, that's old person, like mid 40s, 50s insurance. For a young person like me to actually have this car for that cheap, full coverage, it is really, really amazing. So, if your car is in good enough condition, you can have it insured by Haggerty, and it'll be a lot less. I do recommend it if you do get one of these. But I'm done talking about it. I'm done just riding around it. I think I'm going to take it for a drive and show you guys how great this thing really is on the road. Now, before we head off, I do recommend that you get yourself a replacement key. It shouldn't be too hard to do it because these keys, on the 91s at least, don't have a chip. It'll save you a lot of trouble because yesterday, I lost this key in the yard, and I found it while the locksmith was leaving after unsuccessfully trying to get the trunk open where I thought I locked the key in. So, to be able to save yourself from embarrassment, I do recommend doing that. Don't even just make a second key. Try to make as many keys as you need. But let's get this thing started. Starts right up. No problem. One thing I do like about this car is that it has an oil pressure gauge right in the middle. So if something's wrong, you can see it without any trouble. Now, I'm probably not going to be talking as much during this. I just want you guys to just see how nice and fun this thing could be. I'm going to take some of my favorite back roads. I want to get me a burger, and the back roads are probably the best way to take these things. So let's go ahead and do it. There's one thing I do have to say about these things. They're not the most comfortable cars in the world, but they won't beat you up too bad. Every time I get in this car, I drive it for hours, so now we're pretty much on basically my favorite road in my city. This is a great road to drive this car on. It's pretty much the type of environment this car thrives in. Now I'm not going to go extremely fast. I just want to show you guys the brilliance of the Mazda MX-5 and show you what you get to enjoy on the weekends after a nice hard day, nice hard week of work. And it shows you how great of a weekend classic this thing can be. Takes corners very nice. And you're not even breaking the speed limit either. It's easy to downshift, grab nudge. love a good country road like this. The only roads I like more than country roads are mountain roads. This car is great for a tow day. This really is a good way to put a smile on your face. And the car being topless just makes it a lot more excitable. This car really does make you feel cool when you're driving it. If you do ever get one of these things, I recommend you get the leather air freshener. It really makes you feel like you're driving an old British roadster. Just without the need of having a toolkit with you. Well guys, my journey is over. When you see me, I'll be back home. And I'll pretty much wrap this video up. Well, there we have it. If you ask me, the NA Miata is probably the best first classic car that you can get. These things are reliable, they're fun to drive, and they're very cheap in pretty much every regard. And there's still a lot of them on the road. Well, if you guys like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And I'll be happy to bring more car videos to you.